This week, how to hide in Hong Kong, a new bunch of apples, and dying to save the planet, try green fashion. Other colours are available. For the last 4 months, protesters have been rallying in Hong Kong. First, against a proposed bill that would have allowed the extradition of Hong Kong residents to the Chinese mainland to face criminal trials. That bill has now been withdrawn, but protesters remain on the streets, asking for more demands to be met, including greater democratic freedoms and an inquiry into alleged police brutality. The protests have been watched around the world, with videos uploaded daily showing highly organised groups in the airport, on roads, and even in the legislature. But with no clearly structured leadership. This contrasts with the so-called Umbrella Revolution of 2014, a pro-democracy movement where individual organisers were targeted and jailed. This time, people are using encrypted messaging apps to organise in a more anonymous way and try to avoid interception from the police. China is a world leader in facial recognition, surveillance and artificial intelligence technology, so it's not unthinkable that they've found workarounds to keep an eye on the apps. Danny Vincent is in Hong Kong and he met 2 protesters who were trying to organise without being identified.
A smart lamppost being kicked to the ground and opened up by protesters. Hong Kong authorities say they are used for monitoring the weather, pollution and traffic. But protesters say they could have a more sinister purpose, housing a facial recognition camera for monitoring and identifying people taking part in the protests. They sawed it down to see what was inside. They claim to find computer chips made by a mainland company linked to surveillance.
I think the guys in the front line that took down that surveillance camera, they understand it might be a surveillance system that is monitoring its people, but they actually might not know the entire technology behind it.
Lasers are another way protesters are using relatively low-tech solutions to disrupt the surveillance of the police en masse.
The laser pens are used because if you point it directly to a camera, it will make the sensor of the camera a little bit unstable. It might buy time for us. It might disrupt the police from chasing us.
Hong Kong has seen months of protests. These protests have not been organised by individuals. They've been organised by tens of thousands of people online, and tens of thousands of people have also taken to the streets.
Much of the organisation has been done using online forums and encrypted messenger apps like Telegram. This IT professional and protester has asked us to call him Tony. He's a member of several groups planning protests over Telegram group chats. Some of these groups have tens of thousands of members.
The last time Hong Kong has had such large-scale protest was during the Occupy Central movement, or the Umbrella Revolution. That movement had a leader. The government has targeted that organization afterwards. So this time around, people see that it is safer to participate in this movement without identifying themselves. Without Telegram, I can't imagine how the masses would have coordinated effectively and feeling secure that the police couldn't implicate us or prosecute us.
Some go to even further lengths to protect their digital footprints. Meet Alex.
The phone I use is just a normal Android phone from Samsung that has got a military-grade security. It works as a secondary Android. It is behind the primary Android system. It's 2 separate systems. There's a lot of passwords you have to input in order to get into that secondary Android. It is military grade protected. It's very difficult for the police to trace me digitally.
He suspects the authorities are also becoming increasingly tech savvy. Many have long suspected a loophole in the popular Messenger app, which could allow the government to monitor the communication despite its encryption.
We suspect that the government has been importing all of the Hong Kong phone numbers into the Telegram or the police force Telegram account to help them pinpoint which person is involved in that kind of speech or involved in that conflict.
Telegram claims it's now fixed this loophole, but fixed or not, protesters are developing other methods of communication. These include using AirDrop on iPhones and the BridgeFi app, both over Bluetooth. BridgeFi uses peer-to-peer mesh networking and doesn't need the internet to work. Still, these apps may not be completely surveillance-free. Sometimes face-to-face communication is the only means available.
If the internet is not good and it is not feasible for us to grab our phone, it is better to do it in the field.
This movement has also become an information war between the protesters and police. Protester scouts take photos of police locations and spread the information online. After more than 15 weeks of protest, this movement shows little sign of slowing down.
Hello and welcome to the Week in Tech. It was the week that Alibaba founder Jack Ma retired. He leaves the retail giant China's richest man, worth a reported $38.5 billion. Google was hit by a new antitrust probe following concerns over its grip on the online advertising market. And Apple unveiled its new iPhone, which is giving some fans the creeps. More from the launch event in a bit. It was also the week the longest ever road trip by an electric car was completed. SUVs from Shanghai carmaker iWays travelled over 15,000 kilometres from China to Germany. A journey that lasted 53 days, called for 77 recharging stops and resulted in a Guinness World Record. I hope they took adequate toilet breaks. And sticking with motors, one day you may be able to redecorate your own in a jiffy, thanks to a new colour-changing ink from MIT. Nicknamed Photochromeleon after shade-shifting chameleons, this futuristic dye reacts to different light to produce various hues. And finally, here's a bright idea for a new breed of bot. The Ossibot is powered and steered by light, thanks to a gel which bends towards and oscillates around sources of illumination. The energy-efficient contraption could one day allow seafaring vessels to travel long distances without any fuel. Fingers crossed this flip isn't a flop.
And so to the Steve Jobs Theatre in Cupertino, California for the Apple launch event, where, as expected, the iPhone 11 range was announced. These come with multiple cameras. The 11 Pro and Pro Max have 3, which sees them catching up with Android rivals. What else? Better batteries, a slightly bigger iPad, a bit of an upgrade for the watch, and the pricing for Apple's new TV streaming service was unveiled. Cheaper than Netflix at $4.99 a month. That's in dollars or pounds, although many will argue it needs to be cheaper given the comparative lack of content. The event was titled Buy Innovation Only, but overall there was little to quieten the rumblings over Apple's lack of exactly that recently. Unless you count slow-mo selfies as the groundbreaking feature the world has been waiting for. Well, Dave Lee was there for us, and Dave, first question, most important, slow-mo selfies, why?
Good question, Spen. I think the question for many, is why not? For people like us with short hair, it might not be quite so good to do like a slow, glamorous selfie, but I do think there's going to be the influencers out there that are going to be very excited by the prospect of having a slow-mo selfie just for that added glamour on Instagram.
And certainly it doesn't feel like Apple's leading the charge these days. There have been several iPhone launches recently where we've said you know, they're still playing catch up with companies like Huawei and Samsung.
Yeah, I think that's true, but then I feel like that's perhaps how Apple have been for quite some time, and it's never really been too much of a problem for them. Apart from the initial iPhone, which of course changed everything, everything since then has been kind of iterative. Problem will be though, Sven, is that if you're the sort of person, like most normal people, who wants to buy a phone that lasts you for 3 or 4 years, the new iPhones don't have 5G. So many people might be looking at that and thinking, oh, you know, I'm going to have 5G. Even if I don't have it today, I might have it in a year's time or 2 years' time. This phone doesn't have 5G.
London Fashion Week has kicked off with all its usual glitz and glamour, and as the biggest designers take centre stage to showcase their latest creations and set this year's trends, protesters from Extinction Rebellion gathered outside to remind the world about the true cost of fast fashion. 80 billion pieces of clothing are produced every year, and many of those are discarded not long after they've been bought. The true cost of fast fashion is now becoming apparent. The industry is one of the largest polluters in the world, right up there with oil and agriculture. And cotton production is a big part of its carbon footprint. Almost half of all clothing contains cotton. Well, Lara Lewington has been to Sweden to see a facility which is hoping to refashion our cotton garments several times over.
From the cotton fields to the clothes rail, it takes 20,000 litres of water to make just 1 kilogram of cotton. And to put that into context, that's enough for a t-shirt and a pair of jeans. And that's why what's going on here is so important. At this Swedish recycling mill, a fifth of that water is needed to create a comparable amount of fabric. The place runs on wind and water power, converting cotton into viscose in a process classed as climate positive. These bales are stacked full of denim, in this case leg panels from pairs of jeans. So although this facility could separate any metal fastening or even any stitching which is made out of something that isn't cotton, here this batch has arrived all sorted already. But here an eco-friendly chemical process is followed by de-dyeing the fabric. Any remaining colour is then removed through chlorine-free bleaching. And water then transports this pulp into the next stage where it'll be dried for transportation, resulting in quite literally a blank canvas to be sold on to clothing companies. And this is the end result, a sheet of what's known as circulose, a type of dissolving pulp. That gets sold on and turned into thread, which feels a bit like cotton wool. And from there, of course, it's used to make clothes. Feels pretty nice. That's now made out of viscose, and it's recyclable again, about 5 to 6 times. This was in fact a proof of concept seen on the catwalk a few years back. This was in 2014. 4 years down the line, this facility was ready to be opened.
We can produce 7,000 tons per year annually of this dissolving pulp, and that equals the weight of 30 million t-shirts. We are the first company which is doing this on an industrial scale. We are not just producing kilos, we're producing tons of this, and that's very, very important for the industry to realize that this could be done on a real scale and make a real difference. Because if you just talk about kilos, nobody can actually make a change with a few kilos, but you can make a change with thousands of tons of material. And you can show the world that this is actually working.
Raw materials being sorted is just one piece of the puzzle though. This denim had to be shipped from the US, although with scale more facilities could open worldwide, reducing the carbon footprint of that element. And how about the labour afterwards? Well, that isn't in RenewCell's remit, but is of course part of the bigger picture. In the meantime, high street chain H&M, one investor in the company, will soon have clothing originating from this process on their shop floors. But the big dream here is that by 2030, the clothing industry might use 100% recycled or sustainably sourced materials. And whilst that may sound unachievable now, clearly times and attitudes are changing.
That was Lara in Sweden. So recycling raw materials will undoubtedly be part of a greener future for the fashion industry. But in the meantime, how about this? It looks and feels like a thin cotton t-shirt, but this is actually made from algae and wood pulp. Yeah. The print is 100% algae, and the material is made of lyocell from trees and linen from plants. It's pretty comfortable, I have to say. The care instructions are a little bit fiddly. Basically, keep it cold and don't iron the algae. But the most interesting thing is, when you have finished with it and you want to get rid of it, you can bury it in the garden and it will be gone within 3 months. But something that's even more harmful to the environment than growing cotton is dyeing textiles. 500 billion gallons of fresh water are used in textile dyeing each year. The untreated wastewater from the dye is often discharged into rivers, leaving entire communities with no access to clean water, killing aquatic life and eventually reaching the sea. And get this, it can take about 150 litres of water to dye just 1 kilogram of cotton. Well, LJ Rich has visited a lab in London which is using only 200 millilitres of water to dye a 1 kilogram piece of silk. So what's the secret?
This lab houses a fashion scientist who uses Petri dishes to make colouring clothing more environmentally friendly.
This could be the future of fashion, and it smells like beetroot.
These beautiful designs were created by bacterial activity, no chemicals required.
So how did you come across using bacteria to dye clothing?
So when I was studying material features at St Martin's, I met Professor John Ward here at UCL, and he introduced me to a bacterium called Streptomyces psittacolum. Depending on how it's grown, where it's grown, the pH of that environment, we can produce something like a navy blue, bright pink, and so we use all of these conditions as a design toolkit to influence our patterns and our outcomes on the textile.
The bacterium ferments in a small amount of sugar solution, which produces pigment directly onto fabric as the colony of microorganisms grow. Like a brewery with yeast, Natsai engineers the growing conditions to produce different varieties of colour.
I'm really interested in how technology is changing how we design and fabricate our environments, and especially in the context of climate change and the source of our resources and the impact that they have on the environment. So the imperative for us right now is to try to find ways to change the way in which we process and manufacture textiles, reduce water use, do away with the need for chemicals at the beginning, at the end of the stage.
The process is simple enough that even I could get a start on creating my own microscopic civilization.
There you go. So satisfying. Okay,
And then that's you.
wow. There you go, my first, what would this be, a kind of culture?
It's a cell culture. So we're going to ferment this now for approximately 7 days.
Right.
And we should, at the end of it, have something that looks a little bit more like this.
It's a slow and thoughtful process. It takes a week for the bacteria to transform plain fabric into a kaleidoscope of colours, and it works on a small scale.
I think the challenges are to then take it from a lab scale and then develop that into really large scale processes that both work efficiently but also at the right kind of cost.
As well as these unique organic patterns, the technique can also block dye fabric a uniform colour. But could these tiny microorganisms make a big enough impact on an industrial level?
I am all for the innovative element that we're exploring here. I think it's vital, it's crucial, but it has to happen in parallel with behavior change. Should we be consuming as much as we are consuming? Perhaps not. So I think for us it's very much a two-pronged approach.
And this might help the fashion industry start to get a bit more down to earth.
Brilliant. That was LJ. Meanwhile, I'm visiting London College of Fashion to see a very strange catwalk. I'm looking at 3 identical ladies. Each one is sporting a different piece of streetwear. And it really feels like they are in the room with me. I'm wearing the Magic Leap mixed reality goggles, which overlay computer images onto the real world. The college wanted to explore how we might one day use mixed reality to enhance our online shopping experiences. And this app was the result. This really is so much better than looking at photos of clothing on a website. You really get a sense for how the material hangs and the quality of the fabric too.
Return rates for online shopping are over 60%. So the possibility of trying clothes on virtually before you physically have to do that will make a huge difference to consumer experience.
This could certainly be a better way of shopping for clothes online. Of course, what would be good is if it wasn't an avatar of Martina here wearing the clothes, but an avatar of me. Which is why I find myself wearing my brightest and tightest clothes while my curves are being scanned by a phone.
Capturing 3D content for fashion in the past was either incredibly difficult with hours spent in front of a computer 3D modelling, or very expensive using vast camera arrays. What we are beginning to get towards is the possibility of capturing photorealistic avatars through a smartphone.
You do still have to stand absolutely still for several minutes, all the time remembering what my mum used to say, blue and green should never be seen. And then there's several hours of processing online, but finally, here I am. The same method is also used to capture clothing items. The idea is that clothing companies will scan all of their garments in all different sizes, which you can then pop on to your digital double. But the team here think this application will go far beyond online shopping. They're looking to a time when we'll all have a presence in the digital world and we'll want our avatars to meet each other looking their best. And not only might there be a market for these completely virtual outfits, but one day we might also be able to augment our actual clothes back in the real world.
We truly believe what's called the AR cloud is a digital layer across the real world where there will be different experiences that you can begin to have, and one of those will be fashion. There will be digital clothing, and as certainly from smartphones we're able to depth sense and track the body to a much more accurate level, the possibility that we could be overlaying digital garments onto what we're currently wearing is absolutely realistic, and we believe will happen.
And all those who would like to see me in the hoodie in next week's programme, vote now. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at BBC Click. It's not going to happen. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching and we'll see you soon.